Alright, this was just going to be one video, but then I started making it. It ended up being an hour and a half, and then cutting it together was turning me into the Joker, so I broke it up into two. Here we go. In Season 7, Episode 1, we see Don watching the intro of The Lost Horizon, a 1937 Frank Capra film based on the book of the same name. The storybook pages read, "In these days of wars and rumors of wars, haven't you ever dreamed of a place where there was peace and security, where living was not a struggle but a lasting delight? Of course you have. So has every man since time began. Always the same dream. Sometimes he calls it utopia, sometimes the fountain of youth, and sometimes merely that little chicken farm." And for our cast of certified yearners, these pages apply. For reference, Don is watching this film in 1969, so this movie is about 32 years old at the time of viewing in the show. It flopped at the box office, but was widely critically acclaimed. A similar comparable in terms of floppiness and critical acclaim to today is probably The Shawshank Redemption. I haven't really watched a lot of movies from the 30s, and I gotta tell you, they're hilarious. I'm using a teleprompter. I was trying to hide the mouse. I'm holding the mouse. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? But I watched the full movie just to see, what applied to the rest of the show. And the very next storybook page in the movie reads, "Our story starts in the war-torn Chinese city of Baskul, where Robert Conway has been sent to evacuate 90 white people before they're butchered in a local revolution." Oh my god, we have to evacuate these whites. And for reference, the book this movie is based off of was written in 1933 by an Englishman, and the world at the time was experiencing a lot of colonialism, a lot of fallout from World War I, a lot of fascism, anxiety about another world war. Kind of sounds like right now. What, I'm pretty upset about World War I still. You think it'd get easier as the years pass, but it doesn't. And I know I'm really glossing over the geopolitical context of 1930s China right now, but forgive me, this video is going to be so long as is. Anyways, basically, this group of diplomats needs to escape this fictional Chinese village on the eve of a revolution. Look at the scale of this. Something I love about old movies is they just did that shit. Like, this is a plane taking off in a field with a barn on fire and hundreds of extras running around. They don't make them like they used to. Anyways, the escape pilot is killed and replaced by an evil, nameless, motivationless Chinese pilot who later threatens everybody with a gun. Okay, maybe it's good they don't make them like they used to anymore. After crash landing in the Himalayas, a group of travelers finds them and brings them to the oasis of Shangri-La. Okay, speedrunning the rest of the movie. Shangri-La is the real deal. Our main guy, Robert Conway, wants to stay. To him, it's legit. It's an intellectual, immaterial, peaceful utopia that the leaders of Shangri-La want him to eventually take over. Also, you can literally live for hundreds of years here as long as you don't leave. His brother, George, don't trust like that and wants to leave.
I don't trust like that.
George is essentially like, Shangri-La is a sham. It's not a utopia. There's something dark and scary about this place. We're leaving and we're bringing this woman I met here, whose name is Maria. Okay, so they leave, but being outside of the magic of Shangri-La, Maria's real age catches up with her, Melisandre vibes, and she turns into an old, dead woman. And this drives George Conway insane, and he jumps to his death. Oh! After making it back to society, Robert Conway slips his escort, and after much time searching for how to get back, he eventually makes it back to Shangri-La.
Here's my hope, that we all find our Shangri-La.
I hope we all find our Shangri-La is really the heart of the film, and it raises questions about escapism, reality, and utopia. Is utopia for me? Utopia for thee? Is it right to leave people behind in your life to escape to a land free of conflict? Is it right to give all the speaking lines of Chinese characters to white actors in yellowface? Okay, that last one's pretty cut and dry. No, that one's not okay. That's an easy question to answer. Okay, now let's get to our boys. This is not what a balding man's hairline looks like. They shaved his hairline into this position. My issue is, a guy who is actually balding, his hair wouldn't be thick like this where the hairline starts. It would be thinner. Proof. Look, proof. This is him at a premiere or something. Now that we got that out of the way. When we meet Pete, he's a young, ambitious accountsman for Sterling Cooper, deeply concerned with his status, and a pretty huge slimeball to everybody, especially women. In the pilot, he shows up at Peggy's unannounced after her first day of work, and while she reciprocates, it's a pretty gross use of his position at the company. Like, my man at least had to go into her start work and pull her address off her I-9.
I'm getting married on Sunday.
Why are you here?
I wanted to see you tonight.
Yikes! Pete is a deeply unhappy guy who, like Don, tries to fill his void with liquor and extramarital affairs. Let's specifically talk about Pete's infidelity. I think the Beth Dawes, aka Rory, aka Alexis Bledel, aka his real-life wife at the time, I think the Beth Dawes affair really kind of illustrates how stupid and vain Pete is. Like, having an affair literally so close to home is insulting. And for what? It's similar to Don's affair with Sylvia, both because of the proximity to home, and just like Pete and Don are so in love with these women, but like, why? Like, for real, what is one reason that Don or Pete like Sylvia or Beth? The answer is, they don't. Our sad little guys are just so twisted up that they mistake any kind of affection for love, even when they have the real thing at home. Both of these guys are ready to blow up their lives for these loveless affairs with the added thrill that they might get caught. And it's because they're miserable. Pete and Beth spend one more night together right before she gets husband-mandated shock therapy, which makes her forget about Pete entirely. While visiting her in the hospital, she asks him why a man would cheat.
He probably thought it would be like having a few tall drinks and feeling very, very good, and then he would go back to his life, and that his life with his family was some temporary bandage on a permanent wound.
And that's essentially Pete. He's a deeply unhappy, rich New York City Nepo baby who at times did have it all, but threw it away, seeking short-term dopamine hits in order to remedy his profound sadness. And this is repeated a few times, like when Pete and Don are riding back from a brothel after entertaining a Jaguar client. Pete feels judged by Don because Don did not partake, and Don hits him with some astute observations.
Roger is miserable. I didn't think you were.
I have it all. Wait till your honeymoon's over.
You don't get another chance at what you have.
Of course, we know that Don would later prove this hypocritical, but hey, broken clocks are right twice a day. But not for me, because I use military time for some reason. I'm just a regular guy using military time, don't mind me. Military time, guys. Shut up, stop. Stop it. What are you getting ready for? Cut it out. Pete is throwing away something he'll miss when it's gone. But if you're a dummy, the only way to find out you'll miss it is through losing it. It's getting hot in here. I had to turn on the air conditioning. Let's talk about Pete and Don's relationship. It's complicated. Pete is envious, frustrated, and fiercely loyal to Don, all at the same time. By the nature of the business, Pete is never the person who's most celebrated when landing a big client. He can just get them in the room with Don, who then brings them the rest of the way. The accounts versus creatives is a recurring theme in the show. Here's Duck echoing it in season 2.
Good creative is important, but it can't be running the show.
Jim Cutler would have a similar sentiment in season 7. But nevertheless, Pete is mostly loyal to Don after this meeting in season 1.
Don, fire him if you want, but I'd keep an eye on him. One never knows how loyalty is born.
Which, if we jump to season 7, when some of the partners are trying to remove Don, we see that loyalty was indeed birthed.
And if Cutler doesn't like it, I'm sorry, but the Don Draper show is back.
I appreciate that.
Los Angeles is Shangri-La for Pete in a lot of ways. When Don meets Pete for lunch at the beginning of season 7 at Cantor's, Pete is tan, he's giving out hugs, and he's wearing a damn sweater wrapped around his neck.
The New Yorkers here, they brought as much as we need. But the bagels are terrible. The city's flat and ugly, and the air is brown. But I love the vibrations.
Pete has lived in LA for like 2 months at this point. Before we talk about the stuff Pete left behind to go to his utopia, as a fellow NYC to LA transplant, let me interject. I lived in New York for 5 years, and then now I've lived here in LA for 8 years. Doxing myself. And in the beginning, LA truly feels like a weird fever dream. The first 6 months you're here, it's like you're floating. But I'm reminded of this Adam Sandler SNL sketch.
If you're sad now, you might still feel sad there, okay?
And I'm diagnosing Pete as in his Los Angeles honeymoon, and he will get sad later. We all do. And if you're watching this as a native of SoCal, I'm sorry we all moved here. It's sick here. It's just good here. Trudy was the best thing to ever happen to Pete, full stop. Trudy was built for being a housewife to an advertising executive in the 60s. When she eventually kicks Pete out, she even mentions that all he had to do was keep his affairs in the city.
Couldn't you just pretend? I let you have that apartment. Somehow I thought that there was some dignity in granting permission. We're done, Peter. This is over.
Which in its own right, that's heartbreaking for Trudy. She deserves a loyal and faithful husband. But it also sucks because in some way you have to think that Pete knew the arrangement and broke it on purpose anyways, because he's a fucker. I don't know. He felt remedying his immediate sadness in the short term was the most important thing in his life. While bouncing back between LA and New York, Pete begins to realize what a mistake he's made blowing up his family. Pete acknowledges this.
They want to punish you. And then you get mad, and you want to punish them, but you know it's your fault.
But before we get to the big reunion, let's talk about the merger. The agency being absorbed by McCann was probably my least favorite storyline of this season. Where they end up is fine, but the half-hearted, let's save the company shtick, it felt tired. After getting absorbed, Pete becomes vice president of some division or whatever at McCann, and the client he gets to service is Nabisco, which is cool, I guess. But it's just not as fun in later seasons to see the characters get promoted when you know all the partners netted tens of millions of dollars in today's money during the merger. Duck's inclusion in season 7 is a little goofy. So Duck is basically inventing recruiting and in the search of a huge payday is trying to get Pete to accept a job at a private jet company. I guess the thing that's hard for me to believe specifically about Duck is like, we know he's a raging alcoholic and we see him lie to Pete and the private jet guy over and over again. It's a bit hard to believe they're keeping faith in him orchestrating this. Duck eventually juices the offer to Pete so hard that Pete literally cannot say no. He's getting bought out of his McCann contract and going to Wichita, Kansas to start his new life. There's this sobering line from Duck when telling Pete how much more lucrative the Lear job has become, and that Pete is now charmed. Pete says goodnight and sends him out the door. Duck says,
I've been there. Doesn't last long.
And Duck is a cautionary tale for Pete. Pete used to work for Duck, and now Duck is saying stuff like this.
I just have to fill this one position, and I'll make it through the winter. For old time's sake.
At one point in his career, Duck was on top, and then alcohol and loneliness got the better of him and led him to divorce and dog abandonment. Chauncey represents his old life, his white picket fence, his wife and kids that Duck threw away. Duck rejects Chauncey's love so he can hit the bottle in private. And while Pete doesn't have an alcohol problem yet, Pete is a few bad years away from becoming Duck. I mean, he's already basically divorced and bald. Quick aside about becoming bald. My hair is so long because I know I'll be bald one day. I'm living it up while I can. Guys with thinning hair, that's to you. So Pete decides to take that job in Wichita and to more importantly, beg Trudy to take him back.
I want to start over, and I know I can. I'm not so dumb anymore. I'm not ignoring the fact that I could actually lose your love. I've never loved anyone else. I want to go everywhere with you. Oh.
The show is saying that the cure to Pete's wound is Trudy and Tammy, that it's love. And I'd like to think it works out for them, but like in The Lost Horizon, how good can a perfect place really be? Welcome. But hey, PJ Access can solve a lot of things, so let's just say they live happily ever after, huh? But Campbell family's carbon footprint just skyrocketed. Quick aside, shoutouts to Pete being woke. He doesn't want to buy an apartment building because then he'd have to be a landlord. He calls Harry a certified racist when he complains about MLK Jr. assassination coverage, and he pushes Admiral TV to tap into the popularity with the African-American market, to name a few. Pete was an annoying little prick for 3 seasons at least, and he still kind of is. But Trudy humbling his ass did him a lot of good. Pete is our beautiful, dark, woke king. You pulled it all together right at the buzzer. I thought it was great. Love you, Pete. Look at this guy. Love this guy. I love Pete. What can I say? I love Pete. Hey, give me more Pete. What do you think, huh? Huh? Okay, next. Pete, in this economy, we saw him learn to drive. How fun was it seeing Pete learn to drive? At the beginning of the series, Betty is living the 1960s equivalent of the American dream. A rich husband, a big house in a nice neighborhood, and a couple of kids. The seemingly perfect life. But a deep sadness was lurking underneath. Betty's story is about her trying to be a good wife to men who don't really see her as their equal. It's about having difficulty connecting with her children, and eventually seeking enlightenment through education before the show tragically blows her head smooth off. Am I recording? This is a classic. This is a classic check by me. One time at a college improv show, I ran up to the camera and pressed record, and we did the best hour of improv in our young lives. And then at the end, I went to go stop record, and I actually had already hit it at the beginning of the show. So it's just 2 clips of me running up to the camera, turning it off, and then turning it on. And that scarred me. Imagine an hour of improv shot on a fixed angle and no one's wearing mics. Imagine how good that could have been. Don really only saw Betty as a homemaker, a woman to take care of his kids and serve him dinner and be on his arm when he's out entertaining clients. While they had their moments of connection, like when they had this sweet little picnic and then bonded over littering, Something I didn't know before watching this series is littering was actually a huge problem in the 60s and 70s. Like, I guess it is today now, but like, people used to do that all the time. Like, it took decades of government-backed anti-littering PSAs to change public sentiment about where to put the trash.
This is litter? Yes, this is litter. But litter is too nice a word for trash. Litter is a slap in America's face.
And while they had their moments of connection, Don was a huge dirtbag to Betty, we all know it. The second most gutting Betty storyline is when she calls the number from the phone bill hoping to discover evidence that Don is cheating, and instead discovers Don has been talking to her psychiatrist behind her back. This only furthered Betty's isolation, which caused her to fall into a depression that we never really see her come out of in the whole show. Henry, while flawed, was a better alternative to Don. As far as we know, he was a faithful husband who was better to Betty, but still put her in a box. I think it's important to recognize that Henry's immediate interest in Betty was because of her body and not her personality. Like, yeah, the two shared a connection, but I don't recall Henry ever really giving Betty a deeper compliment beyond "you're beautiful" or "you're smart." Henry was a politician who was looking for a wife who would toe the party line. His party line. While hosting a party for Henry's colleagues, the two clash over Vietnam.
We'd have the morale to win the war.
I agree with Nixon, but I think we should get out while the getting's good.
Since when?
From now on, keep your conversation on how much you hate getting toast crumbs in the butter, and leave the thinking to me.
I'm tired of everyone telling me to shut up. You're sorry you forgot to inform me what I'm supposed to think.
Why don't you run for office?
You know what, Henry? I don't know what I'm going to do, but that's a good idea.
Henry, even though he's the better husband, still treats Betty like his subordinate. Before the events of the series, Betty was a model who spoke multiple languages. She could have had any life she wanted to. But like most women at the time, they settled down in a more traditional role to become a stay-at-home mother, a homemaker to their breadwinner. And there's nothing wrong with being a stay-at-home mom. You don't need to have a career to have a full life. But the issue in Betty's case is no one around her expects her to have any opinions beyond the home. And for someone with Betty's charm and intellect, that sucks. Yeah, you could say writing this I couldn't think of a better phrase than "that sucks." What are you gonna do? Even Henry, the husband she chose because of all the ways he's not like Don, still can only treat her as an extension of himself rather than her own person. Which is why I love the choice for her to go to pursue a degree in psychology. And we'll get to that in a minute. The other thing that makes Betty feel so real is she's a really tough watch, like half the time. Like season 7, episode 3, when they decide to give Bobby a storyline for the first time. Betty volunteers to chaperone Bobby's field trip, much to his surprise. To me, this shows that Betty rarely volunteers in Bobby's life. Being a parent is incredibly hard, and it's that much harder when you're as depressed as Betty is. While Betty is physically present in their lives, in a lot of ways she's mentally absent. Betty goes on this field trip, goes RFK Jr. mode on some raw milk, and after Betty gives her sandwich away, she describes it like this to Henry.
It was a perfect day, and he ruined it.
Also in my notes here, I have written, smoking a cigarette on a school bus is so nails. And yeah, that's cool as hell. Look at that. I want to smoke a cigarette in a school bus. Back to Bobby giving away her lunch. He thought she wasn't going to eat, which implies that Betty is skipping meals probably to maintain her weight. And that tracks with what we've seen and heard from Betty throughout the series. I'm going off teleprompter for a second. This is crazy. I don't know what you do besides this, besides these fat suits, but these are crazy. I'm glad we don't do these anymore. Anyways, this is heartbreaking for Bobby, who made a dumb kid mistake and his mom is making him feel so fucking bad about it.
What happened?
I wish it was yesterday.
Nothing like the gut-wrenching feeling of pissing off your mom, huh, fellas? Of course, though, it's Sally who gets the brunt of Betty's overreactions.
I cut it. I'm sorry.
Oh!
Hey! Betty!
I didn't do anything.
Don't you dare lie to me. I'll cut your fingers off.
Oh!
It was a perfect nose. And I gave it to you.
It's a nose job, not an abortion.
I'm going to break your arm next.
Oh! And Sally gets it a lot worse than Bobby because she's Betty's daughter. In the era that Betty grew up in, it was hammered into her that to be a desirable woman, you need to act like a lady and look the part, or else you won't find a husband, you won't have a life, you won't become someone. So when Sally cuts her own hair, acts inappropriately at the slumber party, or gets hit in the nose, Betty feels like she needs to really drive home the point that these are acts unbecoming of a young woman. Betty's main tactic to do so is threatening violence against Sally, which sucks, and Betty should know better. But Betty's just trying to do the best she can with the tools she's familiar with. She mentions that her own mother threatened to cut her hair when she was bad. I think we can assume Betty was probably hit as a kid just based on the time period and how Betty is. And none of this is to excuse Betty for the way that she's treating Sally. But she's really just a sad mom trying her best and failing. And it's not lost on her.
Then why don't they love me?
I think this is ironic from Betty in regards to Bobby. Like, he was ecstatic she came on the field trip and only gave her sandwich away because he's a dumb kid, not have any malice. And for Sally, it's like, Betty, I think Sally would be nicer to you if you didn't treat her like you were a WWE heel. I want to break your fingers. Betty is so sad, so broken, that she isn't sure what love looks like when it's right in front of her. Sounding like a lot of guys in this show, sounding like a lot of characters in this show. What's extra frustrating for Betty is that without her children, what does she really have? Like, Betty doesn't have any interests or passions that are really shown on screen. I guess dressage for a season, but that didn't stick. Betty was too beautiful to be a horse girl. Hey, whoa. Women that like horses can be beautiful too. Whoa. I'm joking about horse girls, okay? She's too classically beautiful to be a horse girl. Her life is 90% empty, which makes the relationship with her children all the more strained. She wants so badly to be loved and feel happy that the time she is really engaged with her children, she grasps at them too tightly, suffocating the relationship. Which is why her enrolling in grad school to become a psychologist rips so fucking hard. It's perfect. As a therapist, Betty can make sure women in her care get the confidentiality they need and respect they deserve. She can turn her darkness into light for others, and along the way, probably unwind a bunch of her own shit. Imagine a different world, where we get to see Betty try and fail at college, having to tear down her preconceived notions through hard work and perseverance to become a therapist, where she can sit and help others avoid her own pitfalls. This is the path for Betty to fix her life, and it would have been a great storyline. But instead, they put her down like a damn dog. I have a lot of big feelings about Betty's cancer diagnosis. In episode 2 of season 7, while complaining about her life, as teenagers do, Sally says this.
I'd stay here till 1975 if I could get Betty on the ground.
And then the monkey paw curls. In episode 13 of 14 episodes in season 7, Betty cracks her rib on a staircase at college and is hit with a terminal cancer diagnosis. I'm getting pissed off. I'm getting pissed off thinking about this. I don't like talking about this. Something that really bothers me here is that the doctor is giving Henry Betty's diagnosis and not her. Fuck!
It's aggressive, and it's very advanced. I wish there was better news.
Henry urges her to treat it, but Betty doesn't want her last year on Earth to be extended for a few months just to be too sick from the treatment to enjoy them. She never has had control over her own life. She just wants Henry to respect that. But of course he doesn't. He goes to Sally's boarding school and shares the diagnosis. What kills me about all this is that only after Betty decides to make her life better does she get hit with this diagnosis and then the constant disrespect of her wishes. It's cruel. But Betty's diagnosis has me thinking, what does Mad Men say about cancer? Take a guess about how many characters die of cancer in the show, including Betty. 4. Betty, Frank Gleason, Rachel Menken, and Anna Draper. Rachel, we find out about her diagnosis and death in the same episode posthumously. Frank Gleason, we meet and learn of his diagnosis at the same time, and then he's dead the next episode. Anna, we find out, and then 4 episodes later, she dies. Betty, we don't learn about her diagnosis until the penultimate episode of the series, and she presumably dies shortly after that. Mad Men, from a technical perspective, is the greatest period piece of television ever made. The faithfulness to the time period is transcendent. So it makes sense that if you're a character in this show and you get diagnosed with cancer, you're probably dying shortly thereafter to stay true to the time period. Also, pretty much all of our main characters are habitual pack-a-day smokers, so again, it makes total sense for one of them to get lung cancer. But if we're being real, there's clearly another character that should have succumbed to his choices way sooner than Betty. Roger. Roger literally has a heart attack from smoking and drinking all day every day. He slightly changes his lifestyle before reverting back to his old ways. Like, kill Roger instead. If you need a blood sacrifice, let it be him. I think back to when Don was creating work for the American Cancer Society and self-admittedly, half the board were smokers even though they believed in the inherent risks. And in Betty's final appearance, she's still smoking. The show was due for an abrupt cancer diagnosis, but to make it Betty, with 80 minutes of show left, after she decides to build a better life for herself, sucks and is a disservice to the character. In an indirect way, everybody who works at the agency, at Sterling Cooper, at the tobacco companies, the whole advertising industry at large, is in part to blame for Betty's death and really all cancer deaths at the time that were caused by smoking. They tried to make it look sick as hell, and they actively suppressed all the research that said it was bad. So, I don't know, throwing that in there. Think about that. Chew on that for a second. I'm spitballing here, but if I had to rewrite this under the stipulation that she still has to get cancer, I'd enroll Betty in school earlier in the season. Let us see her at college. Let her get hit on by a sophomore or something. Let her feel young again. Diagnose her at the mid-season finale, and then let us really see her come to terms with her mortality over the remaining 6 episodes. Give the character the respect she deserves. Eliminate the Diana storyline and give all that time to Betty. I really try not to look at Reddit or anything until I'm done with the script, but looking now, I'm seeing people comment that Betty's death is some sort of symbolism for the death of the American housewife homemaker, as other characters like Peggy and Joan break down barriers in the workforce and Sally prepares to navigate her life as a modern woman, etc. But I don't really like this. Like, Betty was in grad school with a 2-year-old at home. That doesn't seem very traditional to me. You know what else could have been a symbolic changing of the times? Just letting her become a therapist. Letting her become a working mother. It bugs me when shows leave characters in a new position right at the end. Like, expecting Betty to die imminently and imagining the fallout leaves things a bit unresolved. I felt like we had a lot less interesting stuff going on this season that we gave a lot of time to that could have gone to Betty. Loved watching Betty most of the time. Just thought her ending was cruel. On my last video, I got a comment essentially saying that it was bad that I did not mention how racist Bert was. And they're right. I didn't mention how racist Bert was, and I also didn't mention how racist any of the characters were. And that was an oversight. What comes to mind is the preface before the Roger Blackface episode. In its reliance on historical authenticity, the series producers are committed to exposing injustices and inequities within our society that continue to this day, so we can examine even the most painful parts of our history in order to reflect on who we are today and who we want to become. We are therefore presenting the original episode in its entirety. In the context of the show, it wouldn't make sense for the characters to not at the least have some clunky ideas around race. And they all pretty much do something fucked up. Ken and Harry put Chinese guys in Pete's office as a prank. Pete puts the elevator operator in a weird position when talking about Admiral TVs. Peggy is worried Dawn might steal from her, so she takes her purse into the other room. Bert compares the NAACP to communists and demands Dawn be replaced with a white woman receptionist. Joan blasts Kinsey for having a black girlfriend as some sort of virtue signal. Kinsey, inspired by the civil rights movement, writes a racially charged Star Trek script. Roger does blackface. Lou makes a comment during a meeting with Dawn and the creatives that the group is like Gladys Knight and the Pips. Betty fires Carla with no regard. Our characters are a reflection of the time, and while it's pretty clear the show does not condone any of their actions, it's important to be realistic about what these people would actually be like. Even our beloved Don, our problematic king. Okay, he's not. Now that I'm doing the video, he's not really beloved. He's messed up. Even Don is a part of the racist prank when the agency puts the ad in the paper that they're an equal opportunity employer and then have to actually hire somebody in order to avoid controversy. And it just so happens that the person they hire is the best secretary the agent has ever seen, Dawn Chambers. Dawn's introduction to the series is to show a shifting American workplace in the mid-1960s. African Americans during this time are integrating into more respected front-facing office jobs. But while they're present, the show highlights their treatment is not equal. It's significant that Dawn and Don pretty much have the same name. Like, right away, we can tell that Dawn is one of Don's best secretaries. We pretty much never see her make a mistake, and this is for 2 reasons. 1, Dawn is extraordinarily capable, and 2, she knows she does not have that long of a mistake runway compared to her white counterparts. Back to the name thing. The secretaries prop up all the men they work for. Without them, literally nothing would get done. Any of Pete's successes are also Hildy's, any of Roger's, Caroline's, so on and so on. And it doesn't stop at the office. Like, we're about to watch the clip in a second, secretaries are going out and buying gifts for wives all over the place. They keep these men's lives together. So for Dawn to share Don's name, it's a nod to the invisibility of the secretary's achievements during this time, especially the African American ones. This is a little clunky, but you know what I'm getting at. Sound off in the comments about the name thing. Let me hear you. I don't really feel I got this one fully fleshed out yet. After Dawn gets suspended, Dawn becomes secretary to both Don and Lou and does an amazing job. She works extra hours to keep Don informed of what's going on in the office while at the same time refusing to take extra pay in order to keep things above board. Everything is going fine until Sally shows up looking for Don at the office but finds Lou.
What happened?
His daughter came by and...
Why are we going through all this? I know you can't fire her. Just move her to another part of the building.
What do you mean by that?
but you don't want to.
I skipped my lunch to buy your wife perfume. If you had been thoughtful enough to get her a gift when I told you about it 10 days ago, I would have been here.
Do you understand? It's not my problem.
Another thing Dawn is initially blamed for is the termination of the lease.
You're all fired.
Hold on. Someone at McCann Erickson gave notice in writing.
I was never informed. We were never informed.
Roger tried to fire Shirley and Dawn for something that wasn't their fault. While Shirley and Dawn are both employed by the agency, they both feel like one mistake away from being fired. They address each other by the other's name.
Hello, Dawn.
Hello, Shirley.
I assume this is them referencing their colleagues constantly mixing them up for each other, furthering the idea that while they are present at the office, they are not on equal footing or visibility with everybody else. There's even that whole thing with Shirley's flowers from her fiance that Peggy assumes are for her. It's like, Peggy, you don't think someone would get Shirley flowers? And the show intentionally conflates Dawn and Shirley's characters' endings. After emerging with McCann, Shirley tells Roger this.
This is my last day, and I wanted to thank you.
Bullshit. They can't fire you.
Actually, I took another job. Traveler's insurance. My cousin works there. Advertising is not a very comfortable place for everyone.
This is the last time we see Dawn. And I think the show wants us to take Shirley's ending and just apply it to Dawn too, because the show is intentionally treating Shirley and Dawn as interchangeable to reflect their treatment in the time period. While I think that narratively can make sense, I'm wondering what good does that serve? Like, yeah, it's meta, but for what purpose? Like, to be meta? I know Dawn isn't a main character, and this is just her third season in this show, but we can't get a little more on-screen closure? Could have been better. Part 3 is mostly cut together. I should be posting it soon. Is that a week? Is that a day? You're going to find out when I do. Thanks for watching.